today. Clearly the invasion did not get as far as Scotland, where they still eat babies. But what happened in Scotland was radically different, because they had a radically different monarch. She wasn't a warlike king, she was a queen, Matilda. Like many of her gender, and like all Scots, she was crafty. She knew what the Normans were after. They wanted land. She had loads of it. She didn't have very many people either. So she invited them in. More subjects, more productive land. She let them farm her land. She let them live there, and she charged them taxes, and they paid gratefully. Who got that right? Scotland, as a result, today, still mints its own money. There is a Royal Bank of Scotland. The only place to do so within the United Kingdom. The Royal Bank of Scotland is broke now, but it still exists. It also is the only place that can make its own laws regarding property and land ownership and education. In Scotland, a university education is free. And they've got some of the finest universities in the world. In England, a university education in an old polytechnic will cost you around about £38,000. Who got that right? Wales, you may have heard of. Wales, great place. Wales suffered terribly under the Normans, and this is because the Welsh soldier is the most stubborn soldier in the world. The Welsh soldier does not understand that he is beaten. The Welsh soldier was beaten by the Normans and carried on fighting. They were beaten again. They carried on fighting. They were annihilated. Their mums and dads came out, and their cats and dogs, and they started fighting again. Wales had to be put down by the Normans. It was lost as a kingdom, and it became a principality. We now have a Prince of Wales, the oldest son of the Sovereign of England. If you get the chance while you're here, visit Wales. It's a beautiful place, and if you love medieval defensive architecture, Wales is the place to go and see it. They had to build so many castles to keep the place down. It's an amazing thing. Ireland also suffered under the Normans, but Ireland did not need civilising. Ireland, as I'm sure you're aware, has always been civilised. It's the cradle of humanity. Ireland is a land of poets, beautiful, beautiful women. Guinness. Now, with enough Guinness, every man's a poet. With more than enough Guinness, all women are beautiful. With the Jameson's chaser, you can even see the leprechauns. Ireland has been invaded many times, but it's never been fully conquered. They always took a bite out of Ireland, and it's nearly always centred on Dublin, which was the natural harbour. But it's not an Irish town. It was first taken by the Romans, then the Vikings, then the Normans, and the English, who didn't leave until the 1920s. It's the invaders' town. They always put up a barricade out of this bite-sized chunk they took of Ireland, and that barricade was known as the Pale. Again, in our language today. If someone says that your behaviour was beyond the pale, it means you're behaving like an Irishman. Savage! Yeah. But they just don't understand the way we party, okay? So, if you get a chance to visit Ireland, seize it. It's a great opportunity. It's like returning to heaven. Anyway, there you go. That is a very brief history of the Norman conquest as far as the British Isles go. I've told you that in less than 12 minutes, but it took 12 years for William to put down rebellion and insurrection everywhere, and then his spin doctors came out with a new nickname, William the Conqueror. And at this time, 1078, he felt safe enough to begin work on that, his principal palace and fortress here in London. The work took 20 years to complete. Now, for nearly 500 years, kings and queens lived on the top floor. The floor below was the accommodation for their most favoured knights and ladies, and the lowest floor with windows, that's where the kitchens were. There's another floor, it's partly below ground, walls there, 15 feet thick, no windows, dark. Close to the river, below the water table, it's always damp and cold. This was the perfect place for the wine. Blonde. Okay. You're obsessed with this prisoner nonsense, aren't you? You all are. Our first prisoner was a Frenchman. His His name was Ranulph de Flambard, and he was the Bishop of Durham. Now, it'd be complete lunacy to lock a French bishop, or indeed any bishop, in a wine cellar. Right? So he's actually imprisoned in the top of that turret, the southwest turret, and that was in 1100. By 1101, he'd noticed a few things. He'd seen a few, he'd observed, and he'd come up with a plan. He threw the warders a party, and he had wine brought up from the cellar in casks, which in those days were bound round with rope. Warders did what they do best. Ate too much, drank too much, fell asleep. Ranulph de Flambard saw his moment and seized it. He removed the rope from these casks, and this ancient French bishop, he was 61 at the time, abseiled 90 odd feet on an improvised line and got away. Our first prisoner escaped. Did we learn from this? No. In the Tower's long history, 3,500 prisoners, 81 escapees, an escape ratio of 1 in 42. Statistically, the Tower of London is one of the least secure prisons anywhere in history. It was not until the turn of the 16th century that the wine rack was put to one side and another rack was installed. You're quite right. This rack had a very sinister purpose: torture. Torture is often misunderstood. Many people think of torture as a punishment, but it isn't. It just feels that way. Torture is a way to keep a conversation going. Right? It is a tool of interrogation. And the most famous interrogation we had down there was that of Guy Fawkes, the only man to have entered Parliament with honest, noble intentions, a clear agenda, and the resources to see it through. You will not find in Parliament anytime soon. Now you can learn more about Guy Fawkes, his crime, alleged crime, and his interrogation and eventual execution in the torture exhibit. That's just down those stairs there, and if you keep to the left, don't go through the archway, go to the left of it, you'll see a replica of the rack, which stretched you, and the scavenger's daughter, my own favourite, which crushed you. Anyway, moving on. You ladies, you've not come here to listen to some grumpy old soldier bang on about this. You've come here for the crown jewels, haven't you? The bling thing. And not because you're interested in their history, because you're not. You just want to make the man you're with feel inadequate. And you will. This building is known as the Waterloo Barracks. It's built on the site of the Grand Storehouse. That was destroyed by fire in 1841. And this was built as a barracks for 1,000 soldiers. It was placed on top of the old site. And it was built in 1846, but it looks brand new, doesn't it? At the far end of that building, there is now a door. And if you go through that door, you will be in the Treasury. And in the Treasury, you will see the world's largest perfect cut diamond, at about the size of an egg, at 531 carats. Don't compare your engagement rings with the Star of Africa. Yeah, go on, have another look at that. Yeah, insignificant. You will also see what is largely regarded as the world's most beautiful diamond. It's the Koh-i-Noor, the light of India. We've stolen them from everywhere. Her Majesty's government insists I tell you that they were given to us by grateful nations. Usually at gunpoint. Over there in the corner we have the Queen's house, and this was built as a wedding present for Anne Boleyn. The work commenced on this in 1533, the year of the wedding, completed in 1541, 5 years after her execution. It is now the home of the Constable of the Tower of London and his family, and is being guarded today by soldiers, and I do mean soldiers, of the Coldstream Guards. You see him there in his famous bearskin helmet and greatcoat. Although that is a ceremonial uniform. Be advised that some of these young soldiers have recently returned from combat operations in Afghanistan, and some will shortly have to go back there. The weapon you see is live. It is a British Army assault rifle with bayonet. Do not upset the soldiers! Got that?
Got it.
Yes.
Clear. Good. Yeah, they do deserve your respect. Anyone with a rifle and bayonet deserves your respect, especially if you don't have one. Now this is Tower Green, and it's colour coded. It's grass. I have to explain this because a lot of people spend an hour or so looking for a green tower. These people are Europeans. Europeans are lovely people but they do have syntax problems and talk like Yoda. So, grass it is. Hopefully that's cleared that up for you. You can visit the Beecham Tower. That arched window in there lets light into a chamber haunted by a young blonde woman in a tasteless... Under the new guidelines we have for the tower, I have to tell you if I depart from the truth. That's not a ghost. The coat is tasteless. Don't tell her. I said that. Obviously, want to make a visit here special, so just leave her be. So, her wardrobe problem's her problem, not yours. All right, okay. Anyway, that room, the walls of that room are covered with graffiti. Some of that graffiti is nearly 500 years old. It was left here by the prisoners. Graffiti is not a new problem. Modern art is a new problem. This monstrosity, not you, sir, of perspex, granite and tubular steel is a monument to traitors and mutineers. It should not exist. Traitors and mutineers deserve no monument. This is the site of the private execution scaffold, and it was here that Henry VIII had two of his floozy wives executed. Many husbands bring their wives back to admire the spot. Now, the first of these was Queen Anne Boleyn. She was Henry VIII's second wife. His first wife was Catherine of Aragon, a Spaniard, and they were happily married for 17 years, actually married for 23 years. The last 6 years were rather blighted by the fact that she could not produce a son. She'd given him a daughter, but that wasn't good enough. It rarely is. So he divorced her, married Anne Boleyn. Like Catherine, she gave him a daughter, but could not give him a son. Although extra points, she tried really hard, and not just with Henry. Now, I don't care what your romantic, sentimental attachment might be to the myth of Anne Boleyn. And I really don't want to know if you believe that you were Anne Boleyn in a previous incarnation. On average, I meet 3 of you a year. You can't all be right. You're not special. You're sick. Get help. Anne Boleyn should not be copied, admired or emulated in any way. She was found guilty of adultery with 7 men, including her brother. Now, when you're married to the king, that's treason. And I don't care who you're married to, it's excessive and weird. Not for her, the block and axe. She asked to go out French fashion. On the 19th of May 1536, as she knelt there praying for forgiveness, a Frenchman took off her head with one stroke of a sword. Beautiful. She didn't even know she was dead. When her head was lifted from the straw, the select audience gasped in amazement and horror. So quick had been the execution that as her head came up, they saw her eyes continuing to gaze around at the faces in the crowd. For quite some time, whilst her neck dripped blood, her lips continued to move. But isn't that just like a woman? Last word. Don't know when to keep quiet, do they? Think she'd take the hint by now? No. She was so convinced she was going to get a reprieve that no arrangement had been made for a funeral, and there was no coffin. Anne Boleyn, Queen of England, obviously quite a bit shorter now, had to be stuffed into a humble arrow box. That arrow box lies inside this chapel. The chapel remains a place of Christian worship, and we're about to go in there. Gentlemen, do as I do. Remove your headdress before you go inside. If you have a mobile phone, switch it off. It goes off inside the chapel. God strikes you down dead. Now, for reasons of Crown copyright, there can be no photography or video recording, but for those making a video,